It was a dark, foggy night when Mark and Lisa decided to take a road trip to the mountains. They had been driving for hours. The road wound through dense forests and narrow valleys. The air was chilly, and mist clung to their windshield, making it hard to see. Mark squinted through the fog, trying to see the road ahead. Lisa sat beside him, hands clenched in her lap. The silence of the night pressed down on them. Only the hum of the car engine broke the stillness. They had planned this trip for adventure, but now the darkness felt oppressive. A figure appeared on the side of the road, barely visible through the fog. Mark slowed the car. It was a man, his clothes drenched, standing in the rain with his thumb out. Mark pulled over. The man approached the car. He was tall, with a gaunt face and hollow eyes. His clothes were tattered. He thanked them in a raspy voice, explaining that he had been walking for hours. Mark and Lisa let him into the car. The man sat in the back seat, silent and shivering. They drove on, the fog growing thicker. The road seemed endless, twisting and turning through the dark forest. After a while, the man mentioned that he had been in an accident. His car had broken down, and he had been trying to find help. Mark and Lisa nodded, but unease settled over them. The man's presence felt wrong. They continued driving, the road stretching out before them like a never-ending tunnel. Suddenly, the man leaned forward, asking them to stop the car as he needed to get out. Mark pulled over. The man got out, disappearing into the fog. They watched him go, relieved to be alone again. But as they started driving, they saw him again, standing by the road. Lisa gasped, realizing that it was impossible for the man to be there so quickly. Mark shook his head, fear gripping him. He sped up, but the man appeared again and again, each time closer to the car. Panic set in. Mark pressed the gas pedal harder. The car rolled down the road, but the man was always there just ahead. Finally, they reached a small town. They stopped at a diner, breathless and shaken. Inside, they told their story to the waitress. She listened, eyes wide. She explained that they were not the first to encounter the hitchhiker. There was a legend about a man who had died in an accident on that road years ago. People said he haunted the road, looking for a ride. Mark and Lisa left the diner, the waitress's words echoing in their minds. They never took that road again, the memory of the hitchhiker haunting them forever. But the story didn't end there. Mark and Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in the safety of their own home. Strange things started happening. They would hear knocks on their door late at night, but no one would be there. Mark's car alarm would go off without reason, and once they found muddy footprints leading from the driveway to their front door. One night, a few weeks after the incident, Mark woke up to the sound of someone whispering his name. He turned on the light, but the room was empty. Lisa stirred beside him, asking what was wrong. Mark told her about the whispering, but she brushed it off as a dream. However, the feeling of unease lingered. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences only grew more frequent. One evening, Lisa was home alone when she heard footsteps upstairs. Thinking it was Mark, she called out to him, but there was no answer. She went upstairs to find the source of the noise, but the rooms were empty. Suddenly, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She screamed and ran out of the house, waiting in the car until Mark came home. They decided to install cameras around the house. One night, as they reviewed the footage, they saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of their property, watching the house. It was the same man they had picked up on the road. Panic set in. They called the police, but when they arrived, there was no sign of the man. Mark and Lisa were desperate. They contacted a local priest who agreed to bless the house. The priest walked through each room, saying prayers and sprinkling holy water. For a while, things seemed to calm down, but the feeling of being watched never truly went away. One night, Mark had a vivid dream. He was back on that foggy road, driving endlessly. The man appeared again, but this time he spoke. "You left me," he said. "You can't escape." Mark woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. He knew they had to do something more. They researched the legend of the hitchhiker and found out that his name was David. He had died in a car accident on that very road 50 years ago. It was said that his spirit was restless because he never received a proper burial. Mark and Lisa decided to visit his grave, hoping to bring some peace to his soul. They decided to install cameras around the house. One night, as they reviewed the footage, they saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of their property, watching the house. It was the same man they had picked up on the road. Panic set in. They called the police, but when they arrived, there was no sign of the man. Mark and Lisa were desperate. They contacted a local priest who agreed to bless the house. The priest walked through each room, saying prayers and sprinkling holy water. For a while, things seemed to calm down, but the feeling of being watched never truly went away. One night, Mark had a vivid dream. He was back on that foggy road, driving endlessly. The man appeared again, but this time he spoke. "You left me," he said. "You can't escape." Mark woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. He knew they had to do something more. They researched the legend of the hitchhiker and found out that his name was David. He had died in a car accident on that very road 50 years ago. It was said that his spirit was restless because he never received a proper burial. Mark and Lisa decided to visit his grave, hoping to bring some peace to his soul. They drove to the old cemetery where David was buried. The air was thick with tension as they approached his grave. They laid flowers and said a prayer, asking for forgiveness and peace. As they stood there, the wind picked up and a sense of calm washed over them. When they returned home, the eerie occurrences stopped. The feeling of being watched faded away. Mark and Lisa never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the hitchhiker lingered, a reminder of the strange encounter that had changed their lives forever. Tom was driving home from a business trip late at night. The highway was deserted and the darkness seemed to close in around him. He was tired, eyes heavy with sleep. He needed to find a place to rest. In the distance, he saw the flickering lights of a gas station. Relieved, he pulled in. The place looked old and run down, but it was the only option. Tom got out of the car and walked to the door. It creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, an old man stood behind the counter. He looked up as Tom entered. Tom asked if he could get some gas and directions as he was lost. The old man nodded and told him to fill up first, then they would talk. Tom went back to his car and started pumping gas. The air was cold and he shivered. He glanced around. The place was eerie, with broken lights and overgrown weeds. It felt abandoned. As he finished pumping gas, he heard a noise behind him. He turned, but no one was there. Unease settled over him. He hurried back inside. He told the old man he had filled up and asked for directions. The old man nodded and pulled out a map. As they studied it, Tom noticed something strange. The map was old, showing roads that no longer existed. He frowned, realizing it couldn't be right. The old man looked up, eyes gleaming, saying it was the only map they had. Tom felt a chill. He took the map and left quickly, eager to get away. Back in the car, he unfolded the map. It didn't make sense, but he had no choice. He followed the directions, hoping to find his way. The road led him deeper into the wilderness. Trees closed in on either side, and the night grew darker. Tom's headlights barely cut through the gloom. He drove on, anxiety gnawing at him. Suddenly, his car sputtered and stopped. He was out of gas. Panic surged through him. He looked around. There was no sign of life, just endless trees. He got out, hoping to find help, but the forest was silent. Then he heard it, a whispering sound, faint but clear. It seemed to come from all around him. Fear gripped him. He ran back to the car and locked the doors. The whispering grew louder, filling the car with eerie voices. Tom's phone was dead. He was trapped. The voices surrounded him, pressing in. He huddled in the seat, terrified. Hours passed, each one stretching into eternity. Finally, dawn broke and the voices faded. Tom got out of the car, exhausted. He walked for miles until he found a road. A passing car picked him up, and he told his story. The driver listened, eyes wide, explaining that the gas station had burned down years ago. No one went there anymore because it was said to be haunted by the old owner. Tom never spoke of that night again. The memory of the whispering voices haunted him, a constant reminder of the terror he faced on that lonely road. But the ordeal wasn't over. Tom tried to go back to his routine, but the memories of the gas station lingered. He would often wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing those faint whispers. They seemed to call his name, growing louder until he was forced to get out of bed and check his surroundings. One night, the whispers were so intense that Tom decided to investigate. He drove back to the area where the gas station had once stood. The moon was full, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. As he approached the spot, his car began to sputter and eventually stopped, just like before. Tom got out, flashlight in hand, and walked toward where the gas station used to be. The air was thick with an unexplainable tension. He felt as if he was being watched. The remnants of the gas station were still there, charred wood and broken signs, a ghost of what once was. Suddenly, Tom felt a chill run down his spine. He turned around and saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was the old man from the gas station, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. Tom wanted to run, but his legs felt like lead. The old man stepped forward, raising a bony finger to his lips as if to shush Tom. Then he spoke, his voice echoing with a ghostly resonance. He explained that he was trapped, bound to the gas station because of unfinished business. He needed someone to help him move on, and Tom was the one who had to do it. Tom was terrified, but knew he had no choice. He asked the old man what he needed to do. The old man told him to retrieve an old rusted key hidden under the rubble of the gas station and take it to the cemetery where the old man's family was buried. Tom found the key, its cold metal sending shivers through him. He drove to the cemetery, the whispers growing louder with each passing mile. When he arrived, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The cemetery was ancient, with crumbling tombstones and overgrown weeds. Tom found the old man's family plot and placed the key on the grave as instructed. As he did, the whispers ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. The old man appeared one last time, his face softer, almost at peace. He thanked Tom and vanished, leaving only a cold breeze in his wake. Relieved but shaken, Tom returned home. The nightmares stopped, and the whispers faded into distant memory. He never went back to the gas station or the cemetery, but the experience left a permanent mark on him. He became more cautious, always aware of the thin line between the living and the dead.